Hey everyone, welcome back to Autoimmune Adventures. Today we're going to be talking about something that is often overlooked, but it is deeply needed: emotional connection and support when you are living with chronic illness.
We are so excited to be joined today by Deborah Sharp, a licensed clinical social worker based in Austin, Texas. Deborah specializes in helping individuals, couples, and groups navigate chronic and catastrophic illness. She's led chronic illness process groups, works closely with couples facing health challenges, and is an advocate for deep, authentic connection during difficult times.
Deborah, welcome to Autoimmune Adventures. We're so glad you're here with us. Can you take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience and share a bit about what led you to focus your work on chronic and catastrophic illnesses?
Oh, I can. And thank you for that lovely introduction, Stacy. I'm happy to be here. As you said, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a psychotherapist, and my practice focuses on running psychotherapy groups, including those for people with chronic and catastrophic illness or disability. And what led me to my first education was in nursing. I've always had a love for physiology and understanding how things work. And so I worked as a midwife for a while, many moon ago. And then I went back to school because through my work in midwifery, I came to understand how important emotional connection is for individuals in any sort of crisis. And I wanted to do more of that work. I wanted to learn more about that work. And so that's what brought me into psychotherapy. My mother had narcolepsy. She had the full complex of symptoms of narcolepsy. So she had sleep episodes and cataplexy and hypnagogic hallucinations. And that was at a time when the disease was not very well understood. And so some of the treatments were worse than the disease. And so my earliest, she was diagnosed with narcolepsy when I was 5. So my earliest memories are about living with chronic illness and how you cope and how you compensate and how one person's illness or disease has an impact on the whole family system, on the whole social network. So I breathed that in with, at the same time I was learning how to write, how to read. So this has always been part of my life. And then my father developed early onset Alzheimer's and lived with his disease for 10 years before dying at age 65. So I was 15 when he was diagnosed and 25 when he died. And so that gave me another experience of what it's like to live with, I would categorize that as both chronic and catastrophic. Again, the impact on not only the individual, but on the family system and on the social network. And how important it is to have a social network. Now, whether that's your family or whether that's a friendship network or whether that's a team of professionals or whether it's all three simultaneously, it's so important to have the kind of support you need. And then I discovered again, because my second daughter was diagnosed with leukemia, and she had a chromosomal translocation, which is associated with an especially poor outcome. And she died of her disease after living with it for 3 years. And so again, a personal experience with catastrophic illness. And so both my professional training and my lived personal experience from childhood on has led me to have a deep understanding of what it's like living in and with chronic illness, and also to be really dedicated to doing what I can to make things better or to help people make their own lives better.
It is an honorable kind of work that you are doing. We are so grateful to have you with us. We talk a lot about having support systems. We have our big 6 principles that we suggest to everybody living with chronic illness, and one of them is to have a strong support system. And we are blessed to have each other, us 3 sisters, as you know, the top people in my support system are my girls here. And I have a wonderful husband, but we started this podcast because we know not everybody has that. Not everybody has that. And I think we're very blessed to live in a day and age where we can connect online and build our network that way. But I love the work that you're doing. And so you've led chronic illness groups in the past. And so for people that might not know the difference, what exactly is a process group? And how is that different from a traditional support group?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. It's important to talk about the distinction. So when we were chatting a minute ago, we all agreed, I think, that chronic illness is a part of life. If you're living with your disease, then it's part of your life, but it's not who you are. It's not the only thing you are, right? That you still have to fix breakfast and figure out what you're going to do for work, and you have a life, right? You form relationships, you have all the problems that relationships bring and all the joys, right? Like you have a full life. And so when I'm running a support group, support groups are wonderful. Well, they're wonderful, period, but they're especially useful at diagnosis, right? Or around the period of time. I want to call it diagnosis to accommodation, that phase, right? And I will not use the word acceptance because nobody signs up for this, right? It's like we're not going to endorse, oh boy, that's what I want, right? But I do like the word accommodation. And so support groups are especially good during that period of time and can be good on an ongoing basis because both giving support and receiving support is part of the same circle, right? And so even if you personally, I'm talking now about a support group, that even if you personally have reached the point of accommodation, you've gained a lot of wisdom in that process. The 3 of you know a whole lot, right? And each person that lives with their own experience of chronic or catastrophic illness has a lot of wisdom to share. And so it can be marvelous at diagnosis when you're just, deer in the headlights, nothing. And you're trying to figure out what the impact of this is on your life, what it means, how you're going to cope. And it can be really valuable years down the line in sharing your wisdom and helping those that are coming behind you to learn the ropes, so to speak, to be able to figure out, to be empowered to figure out their own path. So that's the value of a support group, I think. Also, support groups often share tips and tricks.
Yes.
Right? Because you have figured something out along the way. You know something, much, probably more than you want to know about the medical system and how to navigate a medical system, right? And also, there are different aspects, of course, to various chronic illnesses, but autoimmune diseases share a lot of common factors. And so even though you may have one and someone else has a different one, perhaps you're both dealing with fatigue, for instance. And so you can share tips and tricks back and forth about how to manage your obligations, your how to talk to other people about what your needs are. There's a lot of joy in a support group, right? I mean, it's not always joyful, but there's a lot of goodness in a support group. A process group, and this is true of any process group, including the ones that I run for people with chronic illness, brings in more, there's less focus on exclusively your illness. And it brings in more aspects of your whole person, of everything that you are. And so in a process group, we work relationally between members. We work more in the present moment about knowing how you're feeling in what emotional experience you're having in any particular moment, and building up our resilience, our tolerance for our own emotional states and other people's emotional states. What is lovely, and I really enjoy about running a chronic illness process group, and you'll tell me if this matches for you. I'm gonna believe it does, but you'll tell me that it's not often, the three of you have it, you can talk shorthand about chronic illness and then also talk about this cool new recipe you found or whatever. I don't, some day-to-day aspect of your life. And then perhaps some emotional challenge that you're facing that doesn't necessarily have to do with your chronic illness, but you must bring in your chronic illness in order to be understood fully.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's definitely, and for years when I felt like this obligation to explain myself to others sometimes if I couldn't do something or I had to do something differently, I've stopped feeling the need to explain. I don't know if it's just that I got to the point where I'm like, you know what? First of all, nobody cares that much usually. If you're in a support group, probably people do care. But out in the real world, day to day, most people just don't care. But that's really an interesting thing to think about because I have 3 kids that have celiac disease, and they have to learn in their childhood to advocate for themselves. And so food is involved in a lot of social settings, and they have to bring it up, and they have to know how to communicate to keep themselves safe. And they, at the same time, don't want to be different from their peers, and they don't want to have it be weird or they don't want to trouble anybody. And so, yeah, that's an interesting thing you work through with people. I hadn't really thought about it, but it's very, very true.
My granddaughter has celiac disease.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting to learn how to navigate the world with something that is so much a part of you that you don't usually think about it until other people become involved. And so I would agree that is a challenge, but it's something that has personally strengthened me. And it's because I've chosen to let it strengthen me. But it's because I had good therapists and I had a good support system. And I understand that is not always as easily said. It's a lot easier said than done in a lot of cases. Is there a particular moment or insight from one of your groups? I know you need to obviously not cross lines, so I'm not asking for specifics, but could you maybe give us an example of something that has really stuck with you or shaped how you work with your clients from your experience?
This is an idea that we talk about a lot and make reference to in talking about our experience in group. Is this idea, maybe you're familiar with it, the Damocles syndrome. Are you familiar with the story of Damocles?
I know about Damocles, but I don't know what Damocles syndrome involves. So I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. Well, I hope this will speak to you. It does to a lot of people. Damocles, wanted to be king, and saw everything that the king benefited from. Saw the feast, saw all the tribute, saw all the regalia, saw all the luxury, wanted that. And so the king said, okay, you can be king. And so Damocles came up to the throne, and the feast was before him, and everything he had always wanted in life was right there. Until he noticed that there was a sword hanging over his head by a thread. It could fall at any moment. And so Damocles was faced with the choice that the king already knew about, which was he could focus on the feast or he could focus on the sword. And that idea comes up in our group continually. People will make reference to Damocles, right? Like, oh, this is a Damocles moment, right? When whatever your disease process is, whatever your autoimmune disorder is, whatever your catastrophic illness is, it doesn't go away. It's still there. And there can be the temptation, the siren song of focusing so much on that, your illness or disorder, that you lose the moment. You lose the joy in life. And that's the sword. Right? But if you are able to know that the sword is there and yet focus on the feast, focus on relationships, focus on connection, live fully in every moment, well, that's the trick, right?
I love that so much. That's a really beautiful analogy for what we have to do. I think our diseases do hang over us on a thread at times, and we do not always realize that it's not going to change. Thinking about it isn't going to change that it's there, but what we choose to focus on instead makes a huge difference in how our lives go. So enjoy the feast. Enjoy the feast carefully.
Don't lose track of the sword.
Carefully.
Exactly.
Keep track of the sword. Don't sit under it and wildly throw your arms around.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't party so hard that the sword starts swinging.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I love that. That's a beautiful analogy.
Well, I was going to say, I think you've given us a little bit of an example of the magic that happens when people are trying to heal together in a group setting. When you get chronic illness people that come together, and again, obviously we understand you can't give specific examples for HIPAA reasons, but just in general, what are some of the most powerful things that you've seen happen in those spaces as people are coming together as in a group trying to heal?
Oh, sure. Well, I think universally the most powerful thing is to know that you're not alone. That whatever, because I'm telling you something that you live with every day, but I'm going to say it even though it's obvious, that it can be so isolating to have a chronic illness or an autoimmune disorder. It can be so isolating, and it can sometimes feel like, well, I'm the only one that this is happening to. Why me? Right? And when we come together as a group, even though each individual's experience is unique, and you can have exactly the same disorder, exactly the same disease, and have a completely different experience, particularly with autoimmune disorders, which show up so randomly and unusually, which also makes them difficult, the diagnosis journey to be done. But when people come together and pick your most problematic symptom, whatever in your mind, right? Whatever that is, that you at some point in life are thinking, really, this is like, why is this happening to me? I'm the only one. This a little bit of a fun, because it's not fair, really. It's so random. It's not fair. But when we come together as a group and we think, oh, well, actually, I'm not the only, like, this other person, these two people, everybody in the group is dealing with that, right? Then you have a social circle. Then you have a network. Then you're not alone.
Thank you. I really think that's powerful, because I think sometimes, because they talk about them being invisible illnesses, and because, like we said earlier when we were meeting before the podcast, we don't necessarily go and introduce ourselves as, my name is Becky and I have these diseases, kind of thing. When you're meeting people out in the world, most people, if you have an invisible illness, people don't always realize what's going on. And so it can feel isolating because people don't see what's going on. And being in a setting where everybody, like you said, has it out in the open and are discussing it, I can see how that is very, very beneficial.
The other thing I want to say about a process group, again, versus a support group, and both of them are incredibly valuable. I just, something I want to say in contrast is that there is a joy and a solace in being completely known. Completely known. Not only known in our illness or disorder, and not only known in the rest of our lives, but excluding our illness or disorder, but to be known fully as a human being living with a chronic or catastrophic illness. It's a wonderful, it's hard won to get there. Takes time to get there, but it's a joy and a solace.
It is extremely, it's terrifying to me to let people see me completely sometimes. I mean, really only the very closest people to me get to see that, because when you develop friendships, not in a support group setting, out in the world, whether that's through work or community or church or neighbors or whatever, I always just dread the moment in my friendship with someone that I have to let them know that I'm going to be unable to do A, B, or C because of my chronic illness. I always dread that feeling that they're going to be like, oh, she's a downer, or, oh, she's just trying to bail because she doesn't want to do this, or...
Well, that's what you imagine they're going to say.
Right. 99% of the time, people are so generous. And even though they don't understand, if they're a good friend, they're generous. But it does take a no small amount of bravery to let yourself be seen completely. And I can see how being in a support group or a process group would feel like a very safe place to let yourself be vulnerable like that. Because you know that the people there understand where you're coming from. There's so much power in that. When you feel validated, there is so much power in that you can really allow yourself to be seen. I think that's beautiful. And moving on to the next question kind of dovetails into it. The person who sees me the most is my spouse. And I know that you work with couples that, where one or both partners are managing chronic illness. So what would you say are some of those common struggles that you see in those relationships?
I'm so glad you asked that. The most common difficulty that comes up is, let's use the example, and this can work even if both people have something that they're managing, but let's pretend for a moment that only one member of the couple has chronic illness or disorder, right? And so we talked a minute ago about how isolating that can feel. And the tendency, and again, you tell me if this matches your experience, but the tendency can be for the person with the illness, with the illness or disorder, it's that person and their illness, and then there's the other person, right? And that can feel like the primary relationship is with the illness. So what works better, what the goal could be, is for the couple to be the primary relationship, working together to manage the illness or symptom. It's a very different mindset. One of you, Alicia, I think it was you, talked about food. Oh, with your kids, right? And social gatherings, which are often based around food and often cause problems. I was talking at a reflux summit recently where this was just the topic of the day, was what to do about food. And if the couple is working together around choosing restaurants, around planning social events in their home, around how to manage Christmas parties or holiday events, whatever it is you're going to, if the couple is working together, then this is the couple, and the symptoms or disorder is out there, and that's what you want.
And that is helpful. I know sometimes when I go out in public, and my husband sometimes advocates for me, knowing that I can't eat gluten. Like, he's sometimes a better advocate for me than I am myself if I'm with a group of people who aren't aware of that. And even he always keeps it at the forefront of his mind. If I go in to kiss him and he's just eating a piece of bread, he's the one who's going to be like, whoa, let me go brush my teeth first, or whatever, like.
What a gift.
So I think that's very true. I think it's very easy to get consumed by our illnesses, like you said, and make them almost our primary relationship. And so, yeah, I can see why that would be such a valuable way to work with people and help them understand.
I would agree. When illness enters the picture, as we've already discussed, it impacts everything. But I always think about how it can impact communication. One of my really good friends, when she got chronically ill, the communication in her relationship started to deteriorate quickly. How do you help couples talk more openly about the emotional and physical toll they're experiencing with one another so that they can address it together?
Well, first I want to say that's scary, right? Alicia, you said that there were very few places where you're fully known. And of course we want that. We all want to be seen and known and loved for who we are. We all want that, right? And because we're terrified, we do everything in our power to make sure that never happens. And so acknowledging that, for instance, Stacy, you and I could say to your friend, we could say, well, just talk about it, right? But that's not taking into account how very difficult and frightening, how many imaginings we have about someone else's thoughts or feelings, how much fear we have about what they're going to do with the information we offer them, right? And so to just say, well, just talk more. It's not that easy, right? And so acknowledging how difficult and how terrifying it is the first step. And taking it slow. We don't have to dive in with everything all at once. Even with our partners. Even with our partners, we can test the water, right? And it does help if you have a facilitator. It helps reduce the anxiety. You've got someone else to hold your couplehood, right? Someone else to hold the anxiety. And so sometimes we can manage that communication on our own. Sometimes it goes great. And there we go. We're just off to the races, right? But sometimes we need a little bit of help in overcoming our fear and facing our imaginings and finding out what's actually true for the other person. Because remarkably, when we find out what is actually true for the other person, we can tolerate that. But in our imaginings, it's everything all at once. But when someone tells you what's true for them, it's only one thing. It's only whatever it is. That's all. It's only that. And we can tolerate it. I'm sorry, Stacy, what were you?
No, that's fine. All I was going to say was that I really love that, because I remember my father telling me when I was young that it's all of that the things we imagine are always so much bigger and uglier than reality. That reality is usually a much kinder, gentler thing than our wild imagination will make it.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a facilitator who can walk you through the process of unpacking things so that you can actually realize that it's not as bad as you thought it was, and that this other person does care about you and maybe doesn't understand but cares, that helps a whole lot.
That helps so much. And again, that's where a process group can come in, because in order to have those difficult conversations, it is necessary to be able to tolerate our own emotions and someone else's emotions. And a process group can give you a lower stakes place to practice that.
Yeah. How do you handle it as you're helping couples if you find that the couple who doesn't have the chronic or catastrophic illness genuinely isn't interested in taking care of the other person? Because I know that doesn't, usually, like we were just saying, our imagination is going to be far worse than what happens. But occasionally, because I guess I always think about when I was going through cancer, it was before I had married my husband. And honestly, it made me very shy of dating after I went through cancer because of it. But I can't tell you how many times I would be sitting at the cancer center just talking to people as we were waiting to see the doctor, and how many people, both women and men, had their significant other leave them when they got sick with cancer. So I guess if you're seeing that, like, how do you help a couple where one of them, the one that's not ill, seems like they're ready to check out?
No, I feel so sad as you're saying that. It's such a sad idea. And I think that's what everyone's afraid of, right? Is being alone. It's terrible to be alone. To feel alone. Solitude is wonderful, right? But to feel like you're facing something difficult alone, like there's someone that's not there for you. It's the very worst. And I wish that I could tell you that therapists are magical, but we're not. And sometimes it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, we've seen a good number of people on some of the online groups that I am a part of. A heartbreaking number of people post about their relationships failing or hanging on by a thread. because of their chronic illness, or I'm sure there's other things involved, but they perceive it to be because of their chronic illness. And it made me think about when you were talking about how during that diagnosis period and the accommodation period, in my imaginings and in my recollection of my own experience, that period of time is the hardest time to communicate with your partner, because I didn't understand what was going on in my own body. So I didn't know how to talk to him about it. I didn't know how to say, all I knew how to say is, I feel terrible. I feel like garbage. I can't keep my eyes open. I'm exhausted.
So tired.
You know, my joints hurt, blah, blah, blah. And in the beginning, I mean, even when my celiac diagnosis was new, and never would have found that if not for my sisters, but even when that was new, I remember my husband questioning the validity of a lifelong diet without gluten. He was like, are you sure this is crazy? And I'm like, I've done the research. Like, if you want to do the research, you can, or you can just take my word for it, you know. But that period of time where you're trying to come to terms with what your life is now, and there's this very real sense of grief when you receive a diagnosis, and
grief about the life you believed you were going to have.
Exactly. That's what I was going to ask, is how do you help people process that grief or that loss of identity that you can feel when you get a diagnosis?
It's so hard at a time, because that initial diagnosis period is so vulnerable, right? It's so vulnerable. And there's so much pain. And this is true when couples are facing grief of any kind, right? That the problem with grief around chronic illness diagnosis is that it's not labeled as grief. Like, we're not talking about it as a loss. And so it's very hard to do grief work if you're not acknowledging that you're doing grief work, right? If you're not acknowledging that there's a loss happening. And I feel a little tearful as I'm thinking about it, because it's a loss for both partners.
Yeah.
And what's true for grief in general, and it relates to what we're talking about right now, but it relates to grief in general, that if two people, for instance, if you've had the death of a loved one, you're never in exactly the same place at exactly the same time, even if you're grieving the same loss. So one person may be in the depths of despair, and the other person has just gotten, like, okay, maybe I can do this. I can do this, right? It's going to be okay. And that disparity between where the two partners are emotionally at any given moment. Now, of course, their experience is also different, right? One person is grieving what's happening in their body, and the other person is grieving what's happening relationally, right? And so they're not grieving exactly the same thing. And of course, even if they were, they're not going to be at exactly the same point at all times. What happens when, there's a lot of ways for it to go well, but it's pretty much the same way when it goes poorly. And that's resentment. And the person living with chronic illness or disability needs help. Like, we need help.
Yep.
Right? And who knows what kind of help we're going to need today? Because it's not going to be the same as what we needed yesterday or tomorrow or maybe 5 minutes ago. right? And so it's hard to plan for that.
Yep.
And it requires so much communication. And so much communication at a time when, one, you don't know, two, how can you know? And three, you're feeling so vulnerable. And so resentment in the person with the illness can build up rapidly because we want our needs to be met. You know, like we're humans and we have needs and we want them to be met. That would be nice. And we can, we can cope with, okay, he didn't know, she didn't know, whatever. I don't know either. How can you know? Okay, so we can do that for a while. And under the best of circumstances, we can limp along like that until we actually do know what we're doing and communicate enough to build a structure. In the partner, well, we couldn't go out to dinner. Well, we couldn't go to that party. Well, you were so tight. Well, you're not, what, like the resentment builds up there also. And, but I don't want to be that person, that's mean. I'm selfish, right? And so then it's not communicated. And then that's the key, that the resentment builds up on both sides and it becomes a wedge. And that's why I say that it needs to be the couple managing the disorder, not this person over here trying to figure it out and that person over there kind of standing by and feeling helpless. That's not going to go well.
I would agree that is a huge problem for many, many people. Mm-hmm. Like we've said, we've talked to countless people on online support groups, friends that we have, people that we bump into who find out what we do and want to say things. And I've told people on multiple occasions, if you're not managing it together, mm-hmm. then you need to get help from someone like a therapist mm-hmm. who can help you navigate how to manage it together. Because I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to offer that kind of advice. I don't have the credentials to be doing that. I can tell people that it's important to have support, but they need someone who can facilitate that support when they're in their relationship. And then, of course, above all else, they need both of them to be willing to do that. Mm-hmm. So,
and to have patience.
And to have patience to do
it. Because it's not a quick process.
It is definitely not a quick fix. I would agree.
No, and it's up and down. And like you were saying, you don't know we never know like what we're going to need one day and what we're going to need the next. And it takes a certain kind of commitment to someone to sign up for a life of that with them. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't really live up to their wedding vows of in sickness and in health. And
on that day, we seldom know what it's going to mean.
Exactly. I was going to say, when I got married, I was young, I was healthy. We had 3 kids and we were traveling the world and we were doing things and our lives changed. And I'm blessed to have a man that has stood by me and has supported me. But man, it is not easy for either of us. And I appreciate you giving the insight into what it really might be like on their side. Mm-hmm. That's good to think about.
It's a loss on both sides.
I would agree. I would definitely agree.
And we don't want to think that's true. We want to think I'm the same person I've always been, and it's life is different now. You said it. Life. In fact, that was the original title of my chronic illness group. Is Life is Different Now.
That's a great title.
Perfect. It's perfect.
I love that you mentioned that because I think that leads into my next question I wanted to ask, which is, what role does self-compassion play in the healing process? Not just physically, but emotionally and relationally, because I think we're often very, very hard on ourselves.
That's so true. Yeah. Well, If you hadn't said self-compassion, I would have said self-compassion. I love the work of Kristen Neff and her book, Self-Compassion, and her website. I recommend it. And I want to talk about judgment and imagination. Like I've mentioned imagination, right? And so there's two ideas here, and both of them are very important. So y'all help me keep track that I've talked about both of them, okay? Judgment, often, I can't say 100% of the time, but it's pretty close in my experience. Judgment is based in fear. That if you're, feeling righteously indignant about something, you're afraid. I don't know what you're afraid of. I can imagine a lot of things, right? I'll use an example from the perspective of the person who is living with chronic illness. We were talking a few minutes ago about needs and about how unpredictable it is. You're not going to know. You're not going to know. So how in the world could they know, right? And yet, we want our needs to be met perfectly at all times. Of course we do, right? Like that's just what being human is about. We want that. Seldom get it, but we want it. And we can get, because we're afraid of that idea of being alone, of facing this difficult, of being vulnerable, of facing this difficult journey alone by ourselves. That's our fear. Right? And so we can get really judgmental of the other person, like, like I'm feeling whatever you're feeling, and I need whatever I need, and you want to go bowling, or I don't know what, right? And that is somehow a character flaw in you, right? Yeah. So judgment is based in fear. So if we can get in touch with the fear, then it's easier both for ourselves and for our partners, family, whoever we're talking about, to have compassion for our experience. And it doesn't lead to resentment, because resentment corrodes the pipes. What keeps us from saying what's true for us is our imagination of what the other person is going to think or feel or do, right? We have so many imaginings. Many of them are negative, right? Our brains are kind of hardwired to imagine negative outcomes, which makes sense, right? You're walking through the jungle, you need to kind of remember where the tiger is in order to stay alive. I talk a lot about tigers. So when we are imagining things, we're often imagining negative outcomes. It's just kind of the way our brains are wired. We can use that same imagination to imagine wonderful things, which will bring us peace and confidence, but we seldom do it. So I do recommend it as an exercise, like just to kind of build the muscle of imagining good things. Like the next time you start imagining dread consequences, just experiment. See if you can come up with like something really wonderful that would come out of this. For instance, being seen and known and loved for who we are, having a stronger connection, feeling incredible confidence in the foundation of your relationship. Wouldn't it be great?
I love that. And I think that's a great exercise that even those of us that feel like we have pretty good relationships, I think, like you said, looking at it from the other person's perspective. And I do think we always have that are my needs being met? And like you said, if we don't even know what our needs are at any given time, how is our partner supposed to know? So I think that's all wonderful advice.
Medical care professionals, what do you wish that they understood better about the mental and emotional side of living with chronic illness?
I wish they would slow down. And I wish they would use conditional language. This may happen. It's possible. You might. Rather than predictive language. Like you're going to, this happens. Especially when talking about the worst possible outcome.
Oh, amen. Some of the things that I have had doctors say to me about my diseases terrified me. And then I would go home and I'd do a little bit of research myself and realize, okay, yes, this is possible, but it's not likely. If I'm doing things the right way, I can live a very good, fulfilling, wonderful life for a long time. Yes, I will have pain I have to manage. Yes, I will have these other things that may happen. Very much like Damocles, I've got a sword over my head.
Right.
But I still have a feast in front of me and I can still enjoy it. But when you have that, it will be this way and your life is now a miserable waste, it's hard to move forward from that. It's really...
And it's shocking to hear from a doctor's mouth.
Yes.
I mean, sitting in a doctor's office and having somebody say, you're never going to run a marathon and you shouldn't even consider anything like CrossFit. And, you know, like your thyroid is going to shrivel up and die and you're going to have to just take more and more thyroid medication for the rest of your life. All of those things I heard from a doctor's mouth. And it was borderline traumatic for me at that point.
Probably not borderline.
It's obviously stuck with me all these years later. And so, yeah.
Physicians carry authority. Well, it's kind of a 1-2 punch. Like one, they carry authority, and two, they're kind of your lifeline, right? To solutions, to help, to medication, to whatever.
Yeah.
Diagnostic procedures, right? Like that they are the gateway.
We are big proponents of educating yourself and being your own expert on your disease. Because when you do that and you have a doctor that pulls that on you, you can advocate for yourself. Or you can say, I think this is not going to work for me. I'm going to find it. I've walked out of a doctor's office. I've walked out of an exam and fired the doctor on the spot. I've done that, and it was hard to do. It was scary to do because we do grow up feeling like we're taught that the doctor knows best. So we found in our years of experience, the three of us, that the doctor does not always know best.
Well, you are the resident expert on your body.
Yeah.
You're bringing in this idea of agency, of your own power, that you are, whatever anyone, physician or otherwise, tell me too, right? Like anybody, whatever anybody tells you, you have choice. And you are the only one that can weigh the impact of decisions on you. Nobody else knows. Nobody else can know. I mean, you can tell them, but that still quiet place inside you that you can go to and know what's true for you. Nobody else has access to that until you tell them.
All right, we have one last question that we would love to ask you, and it is this. You've seen a lot in your work with practices, mindsets, or tools, and I'm sure you've seen people who need some help with understanding the importance of emotional resilience. And we've talked about a lot of that. But what we want to end on is a high note. So we're going to ask you this. What gives you hope in this work? What is for you the most hopeful thing that we can take away and give to our audience today?
Oh, there's so many success stories. So many. I mean, they're just cascading in my mind right now. That what gives me hope is that I've seen it time and again. What happens when we slow down, when we, like, slowing down is really important. I want to say that, slow down. And when we find that still, quiet place inside, where we can know what is true for us, and then communicate it to ourselves, to our partners, to our families, to the world, to our physicians, right? It's almost like you become a superhero. Like, if you've got that, you can do anything.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. As we close up, we'd like to ask one last question about what you have to offer for our audience. So if you'd please share a little bit about how they can get in contact with you, how they can learn more from you, we'd appreciate that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I think the best way to get in touch with me is through my website, which is my name. You can see it on the screen. It's Deborah-Sharp.com. I have availability to work with individuals, limited availability for couples, and I'm starting a new chronic illness group, and so I'm interviewing potential members for that group. And if you scroll down on, you can read my website, but if you scroll down on my website, you'll find a make an appointment link, and you can just send me a message. There's two options. You can send me an email message, or you can book an appointment.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
To everyone listening, remember that your journey is valid. Your emotions are real. You don't have to walk this path alone. You can find support. There are wonderful people like Deborah who are willing to help, and we don't have to do this by ourselves. So we'll see you next time, adventurers. Remember, you are worthy of joy. Your disease does not define your life. You do.